When it comes to writing your first book, there are a plethora of things to look into. I've been reading this book, Better the Blood, and it's the debut novel of Michael Bennett, and it's one of the best cases of a debut story in which you can still craft an amazing first book. But like many authors and many creators, first books don't come easy, and it's hard to understand what makes a first good book in the first place. So understanding that, whether it's the one you're writing, the one you're publishing, or simply the one you're making, will determine the success of that book for better and worse. In this video, I'm here to document how to improve your first book, and more specifically, 8 mistakes. There's plenty of things to go wrong, but we could break it down to 8 easy mistakes to avoid when writing your first book. If you don't know me, I am Arnel Arcega. I'm an educator of teaching people how to read, teaching people how to write books, and in particular, just making sure people are educated in the world around us. And seeing just how far we can come along in an ever-changing world is determined by the way we see and look at things, which is why I value books so much in the first place. If you're interested in following how well you could write your own book, and I can personally help you one-on-one, check me on the Instagram down below and we can get started working. Let's get to this. The first mistake you need to avoid when writing your first book is having too much details, too little space. Imagine you are writing your first book. You've just begun writing the first chapter or so, and then you notice every so often the paragraphs are just long exposition. Exposition is the important thing in a story. We already known this in our school, in which we've been taught that exposition is the point in anything, whether it's just explaining the details of a world or seeing how things play out. The exposition in a story, likewise a book, is what carries the book from start to finish. But the issue is, coming as an author, you need to see where you start and where you end, which is why many beginnings are so chunky and full of flavorful details that just add nothing to the story. Too much details, too little space. This is a big problem, especially in fantasy novels, in which they have to add so many details to explain their world thoroughly. But if you're coming here, you're expecting your first book to be something a lot more simple. If you're going for the complex route, you could still take my advice here, but this is for the ones where we're trying to break your first book down every little bit. Understand how you can break your book down will be the guaranteed success of your book, which is why I put this as the very first point of this video. Too much details, too little space. We need to make sure that you have just enough details that can easily be explained to the audience what the story is about, while still breaking it down in the easiest manner. I notice the best way I do this is just breaking the paragraphs into little chunks, and just doing that, you could just simply press the enter key on your computer, or you could have like a squiggly line like many authors use to break segments from one part of a story into the next, into the next. As a whole, we want your story to be cohesive. If this is your first book and the first one you're ever writing, we don't want to focus on too many big details. We need to make sure that there's enough space that can leave the audience proud of what they're reading, but also you yourself as the author to not only be able to look back and revise details if you need to, but feel proud of how the story is progressing at a pace level. I notice many authors, like my friend Owen, struggles with how to set up a story because the pacing is so off. What I advise to him then is to simply break the story down into the easiest bits. Sometimes all it takes is 1 to 2 pages to tell a full idea, and then you can just move on to the next with a couple indents and paragraphs. Either way, breaking that system down will allow you to have a full story that will look bigger on the outside, but on the inside, it's relatively digestible. And as an author, that's exactly what you need. Mistake number 2. Absolutely avoid the white room syndrome. I guarantee when you're writing dialogue, or at least attempting to write dialogue, the biggest problem you have is not what the characters are saying, nor what they're doing in the action. It's the setting, the place. The white room syndrome is completely opposite to this full, flavorful room with so many details. It's just an empty space where 2 characters are talking. And when writing your first book with this many plot-heavy stuff, especially for fiction books, you need to make sure you set the standard. Even if you're reciting a story in a nonfiction book, you need to set the exact location in which things happen. Why I suggest you avoid the white room syndrome much more than many other plot details is because this will carry the engagement your audience has with your story. By having them in some sort of place, this specific area, we allow ourselves to see where they're positioned. I noticed that in some of my personal favorite books, for instance, The Stone Monkey right here by Jeffrey Deaver is one of my personal favorite books because I love the way it just sets the standard of what it is. Now, obviously, there will come mistakes when writing your first book, but the easiest way to break it down is by taking in just a small space. It doesn't matter how detailed you can be. You could just say in a hospital room. So long as you have a specific setting in mind, you will know exactly what to write, mainly because you have that specific place. If you have a place to write, then there's enough details to fill up that room until you're completely empty. The third mistake you need to avoid is lacking a clear theme and message. This was the point I wanted to save for last, but on further inspection, I noticed that there's a lot of different ideas that I personally save for importance. As for this point, a clear theme and message. This is what holds your story together. The message you're trying to tell with a book leaves the audience exactly what they need. Whether it's fiction, non-fictional, or even just a couple poems, what you leave with your audience, the clear message you're trying to get across, is what you can gain as an author. And if you don't have that clear theme or message, your story will completely fall apart. You could have all these different subplots going left and right, back and forth, but if you don't connect them all to one central theme, just one idea, then the whole story will be a complete waste. And that's my biggest problem to you. If you've written so far and found a way to not connect every plot detail together for one theme, it's okay. Just break it down into one simple idea and just tie up loose ends so they go back to that theme. It doesn't matter how complex the theme is. It could be just a theme about winning or a theme about contributing and gaining something from the experience. What you need to do in that whole order is to make sure that the message you're telling, for good and for bad, is what you want out of your audience. You want them to learn something, especially out of books, when they're the key learning center point in the modern age now. If we can teach an audience something special, then that's what makes your first book valuable. And this is what will make you as a credible author, whether if it's published or not. The fourth mistake you need to understand when writing your first book, and the key you need to avoid, is simply overusage on some words. The over-reliance on just repeating sets of words is a problem I still currently have, especially in my editing phase when I'm going through my second book now. It's such a scary idea to see just so many words just used over and over again, because there's a problem with that. You see so many details and compare it to many authors, some of the greatest ever, and then make it look like there's enough space where there's not too much details being overused, while you yourself keep on using the word because 5 times in a page. It's okay to use the same words over and over. There is a special novelty to it. You could still tell your story in the manner you want, but we don't want it so that it bores the audience. We don't want too many filler words like or as, and we don't want too many points in which we're just distracted by the words we're reading rather than the story we're engaging with. How I figured this out, and something I'm still figuring out myself, but the thing I learned that makes sense the most to me is just to tell the story like you're speaking. You speak in a manner in your own unique way. Everyone has a different way of engagement, but the way you interact with people, the way you talk with family, friends, and even strangers, that's how you should tell your story. You're doing it completely wrong if you're trying to write this sophisticated novel with so many loose ends and so many details, because the more you write, the more complicated it becomes. So long as you use the words you want to tell, then the over-reliance isn't the problem. The problem itself is that you're not using enough space, enough details in what you're trying to say. It's obvious you need to know a lot more to read and a lot more to write about. So my biggest key when it comes to just using the same words over and over, copy what other authors do. Read what they say and say what you will, because having that balance of both interacting with others and reading more books will be the guaranteed success of your first book. Obviously, if you're writing, you should be reading, because if you don't, then what are you doing as an author? If you're trying to be a striving writer, then this is my advice to you. Just continue reading and continue advising yourself. Your book isn't about just teaching yourself how to write, but it's also teaching an audience to do what they want. And if an audience is engaged with you, like me for instance, they need to know exactly what they want to write about. If you have enough space to tell what you need, then that will make sense for both you and your audience. The fifth mistake you need to avoid when writing your first book is a lack of information. Do not, and I repeat, Do not write a story in which you just don't know the whole idea. Imagine if you are given the prompt to write about a race car. You have no idea what it's about, and just explaining the thorough details left and right about that central race car will not work out because you don't know how it is. You can see a marker and describe it similarly to a race car, and if you move it in that way, it won't play out to the way the readers expect it. Readers have a way of looking at books, and their immersion can change and be shifted depending on the words given. And if you don't explain the details thoroughly as an author, then that lack of information will become your greatest hindrance. What you need to do instead is to delegate your words safely. What I mean by this is to use what you know. Use the information that you know every little detail about in your own real life outside of writing, that you could then just explain it all. This can be as simple as the school or workplace you go to, because explaining it from a place that you personally know gives you more credibility as a writer, that more people in an audience will genuinely enjoy about you. And they will think a lot about what you write more than what you actually say. By having that input of something genuine, the story will come out a lot more fluid and reliable to what your audience is trying to get, no matter if it's just a book they want to read for fun or something they want to learn. This is what you need to do to improve your life and change the information. By lacking the information, your first book will be absolutely terrible. And I guarantee things need to start changing in your own personal life to make the best possible book you can. The sixth mistake you need to avoid when writing your first book is the exposition and characters. Now, this is a lot more loose in what I'm trying to say, but the exposition needs to go down, especially towards the middle and end parts. This point I'm trying to explain here is something a lot more when you at least get through the first act, maybe around 10,000 to 20,000 words, or at least the first couple chapters. Once you get through the process of explaining how your world works, whether it's as simple as real life or a complete fantasy, you need to start elevating the characters involved. The characters in your story will be the big tractor of what will and will not be a good book. Your audience will determine who likes what characters. Your audience has an ability to enjoy characters left and right and dislike characters left and right. So make sure you write characters that not only are just both good but also bad, because we need to see a type of engagement. You want your audience to feel all these kinds of emotions. Don't make your audience feel good just because it's your first book. You want them to feel an emotion. You want them to not just feel a specific kind, but rather every emotion. If you can touch to some degree every emotion, your audience will naturally be hooked. Going back to The Stone Monkey, one of my favorite things about that book is just how much it irritated me in many spots, but in a good kind of way. It led me to engage with the story, and it felt so suspenseful, especially when I got to the end of that novel. By having this point of just gaining this emotional attachment with your story to your audience, this will allow them to be closer with your book and naturally more successful. This can be easily done then by having the characters elevated in your story. Make them shine the most, even above the plot. The plot is good, but if you don't have a good characters, then your story will fall completely flat. Meanwhile, the exposition and what's going on, detract that. You can still have your points in which you do need to explain what is going on in a situation. Remember, no white room syndrome, nor lacking the information required, but you can still implement what you learn so that not only your book will turn out gratefully well, but explained in a thorough manner that everyone will enjoy it. So elevate the characters. You know how to write good characters if you've made it this far in this video. All you need to do now is decrease the exposition and just continue improving the skills you are honing in on. The final two mistakes you need to avoid when writing your first book are those that come with a specific need. What I mean by this is that there's this type of engagement that comes with an audience. I noticed that when writing, and especially with books in particular, they take days upon weeks to finish, and you need to make sure that there's still a level of engagement from the start of the book all the way to the end of the book. And the seventh thing I want you to understand when writing your book, and what you must avoid at all times, is the lack of familiarity. You want to read a unique, special book. These final 2 points go hand in hand with each other, But you want to read a unique book that stands on its own. What you don't want, however, is something completely out of ordinary. I want to read a story about rock bands and music because I love music. It's one of my personal favorite things to experience every day, similar to the gym and working out. But we need to understand that there's a type of familiarity set when you can tell a story about a group of rock band kids living in a suburban house to a group of rock kids coming from space. Obviously, there's still that familiarity, and you can choose whichever metric works. It doesn't matter. Every story can work, but not every idea will be successful. And what you need to understand with familiarity is that we want to connect your specific audience. The more you break it down with this audience, the better they'll naturally respond, the better they'll naturally be at looking at your story. The author isn't as good as they could be unless the audience is, which is why the familiarity, the point you want to get across with your book, is the reason why you can have so many different stories involved. By breaking it down to this sense where you yourself can be seen in the story, this familiar expression will allow the book to shine a lot more and thus make a good first book, even if it is indeed your first book. Make sure you have that grounded level of familiarity, this feeling that you can express and warmth that comes with that first book. Because if you don't have something that shares the same traits with that first book, then naturally you won't be as in belief with it. You don't want something completely out of ordinary, but you don't want something too altruistically simple. It's the balance. Finding that balance is what leads into my final point. The 8th mistake you need to avoid when writing your first book is the brown rock syndrome. This sounds stupid, but it's the complete opposite of the pink elephant syndrome I mentioned a while back. For those who don't know, the pink elephant syndrome is that you need to involve some sort of unique thing that makes your story stand out. As we said in the previous point, familiarity is key in what you're trying to express. You want them to see something special because there's something familiar about it. But the brown rock syndrome is a lot of cases in which you just see a whole bunch of brown rocks. There's so many unique, different colored rocks, yet the one you don't want to see the most are brown rocks. They're basic, they're simple. They're the ones you decorate in kindergarten and the ones you avoid when riding a bike. Why brown rocks and why you should absolutely avoid it is because this is the same with white room syndrome. There's too much little things going on, and this is why your first book doesn't stand out as much as you should. Obviously, keep it simple. I'm looking in my own case of my first book that there is a plethora of details I left in. But as a whole, I kept the idea super simple while still having the pink elephant involved with this whole incident thing going on. The brown rocks is the simplicity. You want to have enough brown rocks to keep your story grounded, but not so many that it overshares and overtakes the entire story's theme and creative institutions. Whatever it is, you need to make sure that there is something special about your book. Avoiding the specialty, the special sauce that makes your book so good, is the problem your book will have. And if you do not do this, I guarantee your first book, no matter it's the one you write or the one you publish, will fail completely. So keep it unique, keep it simple, and do enough to make sure that there's a message left with your audience. These are the 3 big takeaways. And my big tip for you, if you want to just get this feeling across, read more books, specifically of like several different authors, because unlike YouTubers in which they can share the same message, authors have such a unique way of just expressing so many ideas, yet still share the same sentiment about things. So look into it, challenge your worldview, and express how far you can come along. Reading new books like the one I'm reading now can determine the success of your first, second, or even future books above. So remember to keep on reading and keep on writing. The more you do that, the better you understand. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you can check out my other ones after this one. Make sure you can continue learning about your first book and how you can improve on the basis you are at. If you don't know exactly what to do, literally zero idea, just check out my first book in the top link of the description and you can copy the ideas present there. After all this is said and done, I want you to be the better writer than you possibly are. I'm already running laps around you, so start running laps around me. Until next time, keep on reading, keep on writing. Take care.